Hi friends, I'm Jen. Welcome to Be Set Free. So I wanted to revisit the topic about how when you're in abuse, you can't comprehend how bad it is. And it's really not until after you get out and that person is away from you and you start to get space and you start to get a semblance of your own life that not only will you feel relief, you will feel huge relief along with a ton of other emotions, but you will feel absolutely relieved. And it's shocking because when you're in it, you know it's bad, but the relief you feel is such a stark contrast, you can't ignore it. The other thing that starts to happen is you start having more relationships with people, learning things from YouTube or your therapist, other survivors, Facebook, books, and since you're away from the situation, it's like you have space to reflect and you really start to see how bad it was. You really start to see that. So I just want to encourage you if you're in abuse right now and you feel like something's wrong, not only is something probably wrong, it's probably massively wrong. And I just want to encourage you that no matter what, if you're uncomfortable, you can leave. You know, I stayed in my abusive relationship, and I've shared many times about how the people I was coming to would tell me, you know, you just need to pray harder, you need to stay because you're a Christian, you need to stay married. They would say, there's something you're doing, you need to be a better wife, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I had already thought of all those things. Thank you for your advice. So anyways, I made the decision. It was still my decision to stay, right? Even though people were telling me that, I could have made a different decision. And when we separated, we only separated once in our marriage, and we reunited, right? After 2 years, I got through the divorce process. I got all the way up until I filed the divorce papers, you know, and all we had to do was wait 6 months and we would be one more court visit and then we would be divorced. Child support was set, visitation was set, everything was separated. There was nothing to separate, really. You know, belongings and stuff like that. We didn't have anything. I lived with a narcissistic person. We had nothing. And the reason why I decided to get back together with him was because, and I don't recommend this for everybody, my children were being abused during visitation. They were small. They were 5 years old and young, between 3 and 5. By the time we got back together, they were between 5 and 7 years old. And he was using them to get to me. And he was doing it in ways that was hurting their health, right? He was trying to make them as sick as possible, and expose them to situations where they could get ill, and feed them sugar nonstop to make them sick so that it would be harder on me to work. And I know that's a bold statement, but he told me he did that once we got back together. I was seeing this going on. I knew it. And I just, I wasn't getting any help through the courts. I wasn't, the police can only help so much if there's no actual evidence of wrongdoing. It has to be like physical harm where there's like marks on the body. And even then, they don't always help. My point is, I was not getting any official police or court help to keep my kids safe. And I decided for me and for my children that the best thing to do was to take him back. Thankfully, he came back. And in that way, I knew that my kids would always be with me. And they would see him less, because when we lived together, he was always gone doing his whatever. And I encouraged that because I wanted him to be gone. I did not want to leave my children home alone with him. And in this time, the police had told me a lot off the record, off on the side. Whenever, I would have to call the police to the house because he'd start acting crazy. There was a time where I got in a really bad car accident and I was in the emergency room, and the police pulled me aside after seeing how he was treating me and said, there's just a number of occasions where they told me like this, that man you're with, you need to take your kids and run. He is scary. And I was never afraid of him like that, but the police could see, right? I would just tell them, yeah, I know he acts scary, but he would never do anything. He's small inside. Like, he's all scary on the outside, but I'm not afraid of him. And they're like, ma'am, we've seen people like him before, and you need to take your kids and you need to flee. At one point, somebody had called CPS to come to the house. I don't know who it was. I actually think it happened 3 times. Maybe it was my neighbor. I don't think so, though. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was different people, but CPS would come over and they would tell me, you need to have an escape plan. If you don't come up with a safe plan to get you and your children safe from this man, we are actually going to take your kids away, right? And so I'd be like, yeah, I have a safe plan. And I would tell them, what it was, and I had it all ready to go. And I'm like, we've never needed it. He always leaves. I call the police. Everything's fine. Nobody's being hurt. And little did I know, I was in the lion's den, you guys. And when you're in this abuse, you can't understand the full scope of the danger you are in. And it's really true. And what ended up happening was, I thought of him as bipolar. I didn't know anything about narcissism, not until after I had officially left. And I want to say, even with the CPS visiting and saying those things, that didn't sway the judge in any way to protect my children from him. The judge was so dead set against him having visitation with his kids, because he would go into court, the first go around of court, and when we separated, and he'd be, I want to take my kids camping under the stars. I never want to be away from my children. I love them so much. I don't even want to be divorced from my wife, but she's done with me. And, all these dramatics, right? And it was a liberal judge who, maybe I shouldn't say that. I was living in California at the time, and it seemed like a very liberal, judge. And she didn't see through his act. She gave into his act. She was all about that. My voice was so small, I didn't know how to stand up and talk the way I do right now. I doubted myself so much. I blamed myself so much for things he was doing. My brain was so twisted. And I even had the support of a local place in town, abused women's support services. And they would sit there with me in court, and I I was like in PTSD as well, you know what I mean? So it's hard. I understand. I see, I've been there, and that's why I'm telling you these things. What ultimately ended up happening was we got back together. I very rarely left the children alone with him. But there came a point where he refused to work. And before we had separated, he was the only one working and made sure that I stayed home with the kids. And then after we separated, I had no money to take care of my children. I had to start a business. I couldn't afford childcare. It would be $1,600 a month for 3 kids. And so I started my own business, and that's a whole nother video I'd love to do to show you how to do that. But so a couple years into when we had gotten back together, I had taken him back in, he decided he didn't want to work anymore. And I had a business, so he was going to, you know, his excuse was that people at his job don't do their job right. He built houses, and he was a finished carpenter. But he could do everything supposedly from ground up, and he settled on being a finished carpenter, and they weren't building those houses square enough. They weren't building them right. They're taking shortcuts. Everything's a ½ inch off, and then he's supposed to do this finished carpentry and make it look all right, and his bosses just want to take shortcuts, and I can't respect them, and blah, 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 and I'm finally done. Well, what was happening was he's just being a jerk at work, and he would get fired. Right? And so he had enough, and he wasn't going to work, and he just needed a break. So I had him come, and I was like, okay, I understand. And I still didn't understand what was going on, but I was like, wow, okay, that really sucks, you know, why don't you come work with me? So he worked with me for a couple of years, and it was just so horrible. And what happened was finally he said he had been hinting that he had this big thing he wanted to talk to me about, and you know, he would make these public proclamations that he's been, you know, in front of many people, that he's been praying about something he's going to talk to his wife about. And I was just like, finally one day I was like, what is it? What do you want to talk to me about? It's been months. What is it that this thing you're praying about? And he's like, I'm going to stay home. I'm not going to work. I don't want to work anymore. He's working for me, like I said. I don't want to work anymore, and I want to stay home and watch motivational videos on YouTube and read books and do CrossFit. And I was like, no. No. No, 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 no. You're a grown-up, you're a man, and you're my husband, and you're a father, and you will be working. What are you talking about? You can do that stuff after work, like normal people do. Like what I do. That's what I do after work, right? Read books. You know, these is after work stuff. First you work 8 hours a day, and then you do your other things. No, Jen, can't you support me? You know, I can read for the first time in my life. I finally understand reading books. Don't you understand? Aren't you going to support me in this? I want to watch motivational videos and read books and do CrossFit, and that's what I'm doing. So anyways, so that happened. Other things happened. The church got involved. I was in Calvary Church. I had switched churches to a church that would support me in this abuse. Thank you, Jesus. And they saw him freaking out at a marriage class one night, and they just came alongside and tried to counsel him, tried to get him to see, like, hello, you have a family and you take care of your family. Your wife has been supporting you guys for, what, the past 2 years? And now you want to completely do this thing? Like, what are you doing? And he rejected all that. My children started saying, Mom, you know, we need to get out of here. Like, Dad's not good. And while you're working and he's home with us, things aren't okay. And he's flirting with these girls when we go out to the beach, and he's ignoring us and not taking care of us, and he's scary. And they started telling me these things, and I was like, look, if we leave, if we leave, the court will make you have visitation, and I won't be there to protect you. That's why we are still here, okay? And they're like, Mom, we're old now. By this time they were 11, 8, and 9. 8, 9, and 11. And they were older. And I was like, wow, well, I do have enough money to support us. I've been doing it for 3 years. We could go have a nice house. The house we lived in was just a shack. It was scary. And gosh, I guess it's time to do this thing. And so we did, right? So then he had to have visitation with the children. You know, he dropped off the face of the earth for about 6 months and then came back in with a vengeance, saying that he was gone. He was gone so long because he's just been so devastated by me leaving him and everything that's happened. And I couldn't possibly understand the pain that he's been in. And I still didn't understand about narcissism and when they lose supply and all that. I think he was telling the truth now. I thought he was just giving me an excuse then. And it could have been. I figured he was out sowing his oats. You know what I mean? But I could also see how he probably was devastated. I was his main supply. And I was that grade A, you know, codependent. Let me wipe your butt for you. Supply. He had lost all his money because I was the only one making money. You know what I mean? The whole deal. So anyways, he came back in. I'm going to fast forward past a bunch of stuff to get to the point, which is, you know how the police have been telling me that I need to leave, that he's dangerous, that they never see these situations end well. They even said that people like this end up killing family members. Like, they were serious. And I remembered that. I've never forgotten, but I've always wondered what they saw in him that I couldn't see. Because like I said, to me, the more I stood up to him, he shrank. He got smaller. I could see the injured little boy inside of him. And that's what all this monster on the outside was all about. He's just all rah, 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 and little boy inside. Like the Wizard of Oz. You know, how he's this little man inside this machine behind the curtain and he sounds big and scary. He seemed like that to me. So I got my kids cell phones. So when they were at visitation, they could contact me. He was playing, there was something going on with the phone at the house where sometimes it would be available and sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes the bill would be paid, I guess. I don't remember exactly, but they didn't have full contact with me, and the judge said that they could. So I got them cell phones. I said, if anything starts to go on and you get scared, because things were starting to happen where they're getting scared at visitation, he would be gone for hours at a time. They wanted to get a hold of me and couldn't. So I got them cell phones. I said, if anything goes on, we live in a state where you can record and it can be used in court. So if anything goes on and you're scared, you just press that record button. And they did. And they captured him the last visitation. They had been wanting to come home. He had been fighting with them for hours. And one of my children pressed record on her cell phone and set the phone down. And there's a whole recording of him, a knife, trying to get one of them to kill him. One of my daughters picked up the phone and started recording him because then he stood up and started waving the knife at them and threatening them with it. And it's all recorded. Guys, I would never see that coming. I saw neglect. I saw emotional abuse. I knew he was living in filth because I wasn't there to clean it, and a friend had gone in the house to use the bathroom and was mortified. I knew that kind of stuff was going on, and I would tell the court, but it just sounds like a bitter ex-wife telling the court. When they got these recordings, see, one of my daughters called the police. As she was calling the police on her cell phone, he went outside of the house with a knife and cut the telephone wire to the house. He cut the Wi-Fi, so none of the cell phones could work. And thankfully, thank God, she had made that phone call to the police. And at the same time, I'm calling the police because she's telling me her father has a knife and is trying to get them to kill him. I say, call the police. I call the police. Psh, he cut the wire. Guys, the police came and saw the house and couldn't believe that these children were in the house like that. They knew that the recording had been made and they didn't need to see it. They called me to get my children right away. And this is where I'm sharing all this. It's extremely difficult, but we have to be so wise as parents. And the number one priority for us is to keep our kids safe. Sometimes that means we need to leave and get away, and these people will go away. But sometimes that means, unfortunately, given the situation, only you can judge your situation. Sometimes that means staying so that your kids are not left alone and abused and neglected, especially when they're little, okay? When they're little, they can't speak up. They can't even comprehend what's happening, really. They will blame themselves as well. And I want to do another video on educating your children about their parent without bad-mouthing the parent, like how to do that. It's just I'm trying to put it together so that it's hard because the court says that you can't tell your children anything negative about the other parent. But when your children are being abused by the parent and you can't say anything negative about the parent, but the kids are being abused and need to know, and they're blaming themselves for the parent acting the way they're acting toward them, you know, you got to find a way. So I'm still putting together how to make that video to cover myself, to make sure I don't get myself into any legal problems if my videos are discovered, and also to help you, and so you won't be in any trouble, and to help your children so they can understand. So it's a lot, but I say all this to say the police were right. They could see the psychopathic in him, and I couldn't. I couldn't. And my children, you know, we needed that to happen, unfortunately, because he hasn't seen them since. But we wouldn't have gotten any court help unless it had, and it hadn't gotten any court help. We were waiting, my children and I were waiting for them to be old enough so that they can say they don't want to go anymore, since the court just doesn't, they don't take it into account what the other parent says. They just want the parent who doesn't have the kids most of the time, they want them to have access to the kids, and that's all they're worried about. Unless there's a criminal history that you can prove, and that's really hard with these people. So, although it was a horrible thing that happened, and my children will always remember it and never be the same because of it, they also see it as a massive blessing, because they don't have to go anymore. I'm shaking telling you this. Oh, they don't have to go anymore. It's been a long time, and he's been gone. I mean, he was busted. Like, there's no getting around it. It's recorded. I got an attorney. Like, I didn't even have an attorney when we got divorced. He did. And he saw me stand up in court to that. And I can make a video about that too. How to do that gracefully. And so it turns back on them when they start their games. When I got the attorney, I didn't have one for the divorce, but I got the attorney for this because this is my children's safety. And I had proof finally. He knew there was no getting around it. I'm not playing anymore. Like, we're going for the safety, and I'm going to get it. and you're done. And I got a restraining order. When the court date came 6 weeks later for me to get the extension of the restraining order, he didn't do anything that he was advised to do by his original attorney, and he refused to go to court. He said, tell her to drop the restraining order, and I'll drop my rights to the children regarding visitation. He goes, I only ask that I be able to write them letters, and that she will not keep the letters from the children. Otherwise, she will be in trouble. And I was like, fine, that's great. Yeah, of course. Of course I'll show them the letters. And I do. But there's no letters. I say I do because when it first happened, that happened the day before my daughter's birthday. She'll never forget my daughter's 10th birthday. He ended up sending her something, and I gave it to her. A few months later was Christmas. He sent each of the children something. I think it was actually his mom put it all together, and then he sent it. I gave it to them. And maybe he sent my next daughter a couple months later something for her birthday. I think. Yeah, I think a little trinket, you know, and always a card, but with nothing in it. Just says, love, Dad. Nothing. And that was it. That's the last time. Nothing since. And many birthdays, many holidays have gone by, and just nothing. So when you're in the abuse, you can't tell how bad it is. But if there is any sort of abuse going on, no, it's much worse than what you think. And please do what you need to do to be safe, however that is. And you know, I have a passion since I've been through this of walking people through it. And I'm gearing up to be able to feel safe to do that and advertise it, like on YouTube. That I have services available. It's just I have some training I want to do first. But if you have any questions, if you have any topic regarding your situation you want me to make a video about, specifically geared toward your situation, your question, I am happy to do that for free. And just let me know. You can do it privately, and I won't ever say your name. You can reach out to me at besetfreefromabuse@gmail.com and tell me, you know, this is my situation. Can you do a video about it? And I will keep it private, your name private. I can be as vague as you want regarding you, and I will be. So anyways, leave comments if you want to, reach out to me, and I hope this helps you in some way. Okay, warrior? That's what you are. I'll talk to you soon.